no way this team can't be leaving Oakland. That is such a shame. Marshawn had the Oakland Coliseum rocking. Robin, Marshawn showed more emotion on the sideline in that game than 2 Super Bowl appearances. 1 win, 1 loss. Welcome to SI Now. It's Monday, September 18th. I'm Maggie. That is Robin. The Raiders look like one of the best teams in the AFC, Robin. The second best team in the AFC could be the Denver Broncos. They thoroughly outplayed the Cowboys, beating Dallas by 25 points. So I'll ask you, did you see this more as a Broncos win and something, very overwhelming, or was this a Dallas loss?
I'm going to go with a Broncos win. I mean, it's easy to jump to the Dallas loss because they had such a great season last year, because Ezekiel Elliott struggled so much, because Dak Prescott had one of his worst games as a pro. But I believe it's what the Broncos did more than what the Cowboys didn't do, and that was defensively. They really got after them. I mean, it's difficult to slow down the vaunted Cowboys offensive line and shut Ezekiel Elliott down at the line of scrimmage, get in Dak's face. And on the other side, Trevor Siemian, I thought, was legitimately impressive at the quarterback spot for Denver. Not just accurate, but rolling out, doing some things to help them move down the field. The Broncos look like a bona fide team to me.
See, I think the fact that they made Siemian look like an all-pro means that Dallas did not bring the A game, and they obviously were the ones who lost this game. Zeke Elliott, bad, 9 carries, 8 yards. They just didn't have another adjustment, didn't have a plan B. Same thing with Dak Prescott, scores 2 touchdowns. This was numbers that came in garbage time. But the fact that Dallas didn't seem to have the type of energy and enthusiasm that we're used to seeing, I think puts this squarely on their shoulders. Maybe it was the hour delay because of lightning. Maybe it was the altitude. Either way, Dallas looked pedestrian. They didn't even look like they wanted to be there. And yes, the offensive line is always such a strength for the Cowboys. They shot themselves in the foot. Penalties, false starts all over the place, and bad reads. They were getting eaten up. One thing that Derek Wolfe of the Broncos said after the game, which I think is incredibly illuminating, so wake up, rest of the NFL. He said, we knew if we took away Zeke Elliott, Dak Prescott could not beat us. You're talking about the reigning offensive rookie of the year. And the Broncos said, you take away the leading rusher from last season, and your quarterback cannot beat us. That is a time for Dallas to look themselves in the mirror.
I will say this. Dallas hasn't gotten their butt kicked like that since last year. I mean, the whole season. So you got to go a year back since Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott emerged on the scene. And you said they didn't want to be there. Speaking of people who didn't want to be there, Los Angeles fans.
Ouch.
The whole 2 teams in LA thing, skeptics got a lot of ammunition over the weekend as USC Texas outdrew the Rams and Chargers combined. Is the NFL in Los Angeles a bad idea?
Didn't we already know this? What happened is that both teams, both the Chargers and the Rams, used Los Angeles to try to gain leverage over the citizens of San Diego and St. Louis to try to get them to build stadiums, new stadiums. And you know what? The people of those cities said, we're not going to bite. We're not going to build you and pay for your fancy stadium. So then the teams had to move, even though this was not the best idea. Now we know that the NFL is going to build this massive complex in LA. They're going to have the NFL Network there. They'll probably want to have the combine there and the draft. If fans aren't showing up for games, they're not going to show up to watch guys run the 40 in their underpants. They're not going to show up for the draft. This was a massive miscalculation. You remember when Mark Cuban said that fat hogs get slaughtered? Well, if they build this big Shangri-La thing in LA, it's going to be a living albatross of just how badly the NFL read their audience in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's a terrible move, I think. The allure of LA is cool, and I could buy that when you're talking one team. Maybe one team is sustainable there. But 2 teams, it's not like billionaires. What's better than 1 billionaire, 2? It doesn't work for LA football teams.
Diminishing returns, yes. What was billed as the real boxing match of the summer and fall, that would be Triple G and Canelo Alvarez, delivered on the promise of a big drama show in the ring. But the judges' scorecards, equally as dramatic, because the bout ended in a draw, with one judge clearly abusing their position, scoring the fight as a blowout for Alvarez. Robin, will the appetite for the rematch be bigger than the first bout?
I actually think so, because this is a talking point what happened. You had people interested. The boxing fans, of course, were building up this fight for months, maybe years. The casual fan was like, all right, everyone says I should watch this. Let me watch this. This incentivizes them to come back the next time because they are now emotionally invested in the outcome. So a draw, I think, was the best possible outcome and was reasonable. I think a draw was reasonable. What was not reasonable was the 118-110 score. That's the kind of thing that makes you suspect corruption is afoot, because there is no one with working sensory perception of any kind who could watch that fight, consume that fight, and think Canelo Alvarez won it by a blowout. Best case scenario, he won it narrowly, but definitely not going away.
No, and I actually believe that Triple G won this fight, but a draw is not totally unreasonable considering it was very close. But I think that this is where boxing always shoots itself in the foot. Every time it gets a bigger audience, it does something to completely turn them off. Mayweather-Pacquiao, everybody tuned in. Pacquiao had a bum shoulder, did not live up to the hype by any stretch of the imagination. Now Triple G Alvarez, everybody tunes in. One judge has it, 118-110. It looks like this is completely corrupt. So I think the casual fan says, peace out on the rematch. I don't know why I would have any confidence that I'm going to see something really good.
I think that's boxing's biggest problem when it comes to following the sport religiously. They don't have a sanctioning, governing body. They don't have a like MMA has UFC, we know NFL, football, NBA basketball, MLB baseball, so on and so forth. I don't think it hurts the big hyped bouts, though, because you mentioned Mayweather-Pacquiao. I don't think Mayweather-Pacquiao being a dud hurt Mayweather-McGregor, just like I don't think the outcome and the way this came about will hurt a rematch between Triple G and Alvarez.
I think you got to put Mayweather-McGregor, though, as an outlier. They promoted their asses off for that fight. So that was unlike any kind of promotion we've ever seen. Turned dark in some places, but you cannot disagree with the fact that it got people to tune in and to pay a heavy price. Another thing about the rematch in terms of just the guys boxing, the styles in the ring, I don't see another gear for Alvarez. I feel like this was one of his best fights. I mean, he showed us everything, the power, the counter-punching ability, how he was able to work his way off the ropes, how he was able to, the footwork, the speed, everything that we thought we were going to get with Alvarez, we got. Triple G, on the other hand, tentative the first couple rounds. I think could have had a little bit of a better game plan, maybe respected Canelo's counter-punching a little too much, and we didn't see him landing the power punches that we're used to. So for me, if I'm tuning in, I'm thinking Triple G can only be at the advantage here because I see other gears and places where he could pick up his game plan that left off in the first fight. Canelo, I don't see where he can improve.
Well, I'm pretty sure Triple G has an adamantium skeleton. We may have a mystery to solve. According to screenshots, Wolverine has an adamantium skeleton. That's not a mystery. We may have a mystery to solve, as I said. According to screenshots floating around online, Kevin Durant's Twitter account apparently tweeted and deleted responses to fans defending KD's departure from Oklahoma City in the third person.
Oh, no.
Now we still need to confirm 100% the tweets in question are real, but if they are, could KD actually have created other accounts to stick up for himself and forgot to switch? Could this be a mistake from a social media manager? What is happening?
Yeah, I'll try to explain it the best I can because I have no idea. This is one for Encyclopedia Brown. I don't know what's happening. Hacked, maybe. Social media manager? No way. I can't imagine that Kevin Durant's going to let anyone fire off a tweet on his behalf. No chance. And the problem is that KD gets no benefit of the doubt here. He has made his entire public persona, everything outside of a basketball court, has all been about the haters and feeding into them by trying to shut them up. So the fact that KD, who used his own shoe, the latest shoe, to try to go after the haters on Twitter and his doubters, if this is true for KD, I cannot think of something that is more incredibly lame and corny. You have everything. You've done it. You won the rings. Just stop. You have to stop with the shoes. You have to stop on Twitter. If you're losing, who's winning? Just, it's over. And this is so lame if this is actually him.
There's no way he was hacked because the tweets were deleted right away. Plus, who hacks into somebody's account and then defends them in the reply section? You tweet something weird out. That's what you do when you hack them. For the millionth time, both of these things can be true. Kevin Durant is a great player, and going to a 73-win team is perfectly justifiably criticized, and that's what's happening here. You know, I need to take some of his advice, though. Maybe I should create a fake Twitter account and just go online and Robin Lundberg is the best.
He's the best. His takes are the best.
Yeah, anyone who says otherwise is whack. I don't know.
I'd be like, Maggie, she's the most beautiful. There's nobody more beautiful. Have you seen her in person? She's gorgeous.
I would agree with that.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks. I get a lot of help. Meanwhile, let's talk to Tiki Barber, shall we? Is Tiki there?
I am.
Oh, it's not a fake account. It's really Tiki.
It's not fake Tiki. It's real Tiki. Robin's got a question for you.
Yeah,
It could be Rondé, though.
Oh, that's a good call.
Good call.
We all saw Marshawn, no confusing him for anybody else, getting hyphy on the sideline. I enjoyed it. The Jets players didn't, with players saying it should infuriate them. How should the Jets take that dance?
Well, this has become a cliche at this point in sports. If you don't want a guy celebrating, dancing, doing whatever it is he's doing, stop him from being a beast on you. Look, Marshawn Lynch, I think, is one of the great things that happened to Oakland because there was some serious concern that Raiders fans would rebel, would start fights, would be chaotic in the stands, obviously more so than they already always are. But Marshawn has made this a party out in Oakland, and as amazing as he's played the first couple of weeks, as amazing as the energy is that he brings to that stadium, it's only going to get better if they keep winning. So I loved what he did. Obviously, the Jets hated it, but they should hate their play more so than they hate Marshawn Lynch.
Tiki, you're so right. I was in Vegas the last time, and I happened to go to Fremont Street, and I saw a sign that said the Raiders are coming, and I looked around at the crowd on Fremont Street and said, somebody's going to die. Somebody is going to get stabbed here. This is not going to end well. Meanwhile, let's talk about Dallas. Zeke Elliott, his worst performance as a pro, rushed 9 times for 8 yards. Now, Peter King, the MMQB, our colleague, is advocating for Zeke to be punished by the team for not attempting to tackle Chris Harris on a pick of Dak Prescott. Do the Cowboys need to send a message to Zeke?
No, I don't think that they should. I think he needs to get a stern talking to from his running back coach, Gary Brown, who's a good friend of mine. I don't think they're going to suspend him at all, despite what Peter King says. And obviously Jason Garrett, their head coach. Look, Zach is a young player, and we all know, and it goes without saying, that he has a ton on his mind right now, given the investigation that's going into his domestic violence issues with his former girlfriend. Let's not also forget, this is only his second year. And last year, he was a beast. You know, not to talk about Marshawn Lynch. Zeke was the beast last year. He led the league in rushing, 1,600 yards. He was amazing and really hadn't experienced failure. Previously, his worst game was against the Giants, which was his inaugural game, where he rushed for 51 yards and a touchdown. So to go from that all season long, having great success, to finally experiencing mediocrity, I mean, actually below mediocrity, with only 8 yards on 9 carries, is frustrating for him. Obviously, in the middle of the third quarter, that was still a game that was still in reach, down by 18 points. But that was frustration coming out, and that's maturity that he just hasn't fully developed yet. So, yeah, talk to him sternly, but I don't think you suspend him.
Speaking of frustrated, Adrian Peterson saw limited ineffective action again for the Saints in the loss to the Patriots.
Yeah.
Is Adrian Peterson even worth rostering for them at this point?
Well, you know what? The problem is I think Adrian thought he was going someplace where they were going to respect his ability to be a stud. And we saw it in Minnesota for all those years. They were just willing to turn around and hand him the rock for 25, sometimes 30 carries and get 2,000 yards. But the New Orleans Saints just aren't that team. They don't run the ball that much. You have to go all the way back to 2009. That is when the Saints won the Super Bowl, to see where they had a top 10 finish in rushing attempts. Since then, they've been 20, 28, 29. Sometimes the highest they got, I think, was last year at 19. And even if they do run the ball a lot, they do it by committee. That year, when they won the Super Bowl, it was Mike Bell and Pierre Thomas and Reggie Bush as a 3-headed monster. So AP came in with the expectation that he was going to get this enormous workload, but he must not have done his research on his head coach, Sean Payton, who spreads the ball around regardless of who he has in the backfield. And now, with Drew Brees playing the way he is, 5,000 yards a year, he just doesn't run it a lot. So this is actually a mix and a match that doesn't fit. They are not a running team to the extent that I think Adrian Peterson wants them to be a running team.
Yeah, it really goes to what Jenny Vrentas said in our show last week, just how few options Adrian Peterson had before the season started because he wanted to sign before the draft. I know we rarely see trades in the NFL, but I wonder if we might keep our eye for someone who needs a running back like Adrian Peterson.
Like the Giants, maybe,
like the
Maggie?
Giants. I know. He wanted to go there, and I don't think the Giants wanted him. Maybe they'll sing a different tune. We'll know that maybe tonight when they play the Lions. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but let's stick in the NFC. Another team we thought we were going to be a contender, the Seahawks. We know their offensive line is subpar, Tiki, but the offense looked dreadful. Add on the fact that Eddie Lacy was a healthy scratch. For as good as the defense is, are the Seahawks fake contenders if their offense continues to stall?
Well, they are if they don't learn how to score points. I mean, it took a miracle play, if you were watching the highlights of this game or saw this game live, of Russell Wilson scrambling around, dodging these two Oregon defenders, obviously now on the San Francisco 49ers, before he floated one up to Paul Richardson and scored their first touchdown of the season. But it took forever to get them any consistency. Look, they were a healthy scratch here with Eddie Lacy, because Chris Carson has been unbelievable coming out of the backfield. And so they found a runner who is young. He's a 7th-round draft pick who can do what they need out of the backfield. What they need to really figure out how to do, though, Maggie, is protect Russell Wilson. He was sacked 40-plus times last year. The previous year, he was sacked 40-plus times. And if it wasn't for his athleticism, he'd probably be up in the 60, 70 sacks a year, and that's just not tenable for a team that wants to compete. We know, just like the Denver Broncos, that the Seattle Seahawks defense will win them football games. But in order to win any football game, you have to score points, and the Seahawks just haven't been doing that consistently.
Well, what about teams that have impressed you? Which team, to you, is the most impressive after 2 weeks?
Oh, man, the Kansas City Chiefs have been unbelievable. And obviously, it's because of their team speed. We talked about Kareem Hunt last week coming out of nowhere in Toledo, just a monster up in New England on the road. This week, he got bogged down a little bit early, but he found a way to make a big play. When you have a guy that can change field position on any given play, it gives you so much more freedom as a play caller, and we're starting to see that in the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And I don't know if I've seen a team run a shovel pass to a tight end as much as I've seen Travis Kelce get these in the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to knock it and say, man, there's no chance for that to be successful. Not another week in a row, but here we see him getting a shovel pass, being unbelievably athletic. And at this point, because his continued consistency being on the field health-wise, I think you got to position him as a top tight end in the league.
It looked like he was out there doing the triple jump at certain points. It was like he was some kind of Olympic. It was like the heptathlon out there. Although the penalties that he's getting in terms of the excessive celebration and things like that might have to go down. All right, we teased it. Let's talk about the Giants. You are the all-time leading rusher in Giants history. Tonight they host the Detroit Lions. Two obvious storylines, Tiki. Odell Beckham Jr.'s status and the offensive line's problems for the Giants. Give us another thing to watch, maybe something under the radar that you'll be looking for tonight.
I think the most important thing to watch is to see if this Giants defense can become opportunistic. Right, we've seen the Denver Broncos do this. We saw the pick six at the end of the game by Aqib Talib that sealed the game against the Dallas Cowboys. We've seen the Houston Texans be this way in previous years. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks were this way for a long time when they were the Legion of Boom. There's still a little bit of boom left, but not maybe as much. But if the New York Giants want to help this team continue on the ascent that they've been on over the last year or so, they have to start scoring on defense. Now, that's hard to say, and it's hard to do, but given where the Giants are offensively, they have to. Odell Beckham Jr. is such an unbelievable player, but he's hurt. And we don't know if he's going to be, one, on the field tonight, and two, if he's going to be fully healthy for another week or maybe 4 weeks going forward. The Giants' defense has to start helping their offense. That's the only way I see them getting better. To date, especially after that Dallas game where they played 50 or so snaps in the first half, they're just going to get worn out if they don't start controlling the ball a little bit better.
That's something we'll be looking forward to along with you. This Monday Night Football game, Giants and Lions, should be a good one. Tiki Barber, we'll see you next week in the studio. Looking forward to that.
Most certainly. Instead of being on a Skype call halfway across the world.
It's okay. Looks good, though. Looks good. Sounds good. We'll see you next week.
See you guys. Be well.
You too.
Colin Kaepernick, do you think he can play again in the NFL?
I sure hope so. You know, I've always watched him and admired him, the way that he's played. was a great young quarterback. He came to our stadium and beat us and took his team to the Super Bowl in 2012. He accomplished a lot in the pros as a player, and he's certainly qualified, and I hope he gets a shot.
Another week, another round of significant names discussing Colin Kaepernick. We heard Tom Brady say he should get a shot. And Friday, I was at the Meadows Festival where Jay-Z dedicated his song, The Story of O.J., to Cap. I think the NFL thought this would blow over, but as long as he isn't signed, I believe it will be the most omnipresent story in the league. It kind of reminds me of one of those cartoons where the little cloud keeps following the character wherever he goes. And Maggie, we now have Kaepernick on record saying he's working out daily and ready to play. So that no longer works as an excuse for the detractors.
He said he's always wanted to play. And the irony here is that while, yes, I think this is a story that has followed the league and will continue to shadow the league as the season moves forward, I think that if he does get signed by a team, I think that the news cycle on is actually going to be relatively short because the team that theoretically he would go to either has a quarterback who just got injured so he could come in as the savior, or they have a quarterback that's underperforming. So either way, it's going to be a positive thing if a team has to bring him in because that means that the starter was struggling so much or injured. I mean, the other thing about it is this report about Bengals players maybe wanting Kaepernick to come in and have a shot with them. Now, that's a little bit of a new twist. Obviously, these players, anonymous, it was a Pro Football Talk report that came out. No one's going to put their name on it because that would be disrespectful to the starting quarterback and the backup. But if you see teams as the season's moving forward saying, our guy can't get it done, we're going to start putting things in the news cycle out there that say we want Kaepernick, maybe it puts a little bit of pressure on the front offices of these teams.
And you start getting fans saying, hey, this guy would definitely upgrade our position here. I mean, he would upgrade the team he was on before, San Francisco. And to your point about it being a relatively short news cycle, I completely agree. Once he's signed, there will be some reaction, and then it will go away. And as evidence of that, I state what he did at the end of last year. He played for the 49ers every week toward the end of the season, and it wasn't a weekly story.
Well, and that's a little bit of a microcosm of, I think, this entire Kaepernick, we'll call it situation, which is people have been so focused on the what, it's not focused on the why. Even when Kaepernick was playing, the conversation was about the kneeling. It wasn't about why he was doing it. And so I think while the idea of kneeling and the idea of taking a knee during the anthem might still move on, I think it might get divorced of Kaepernick if he starts to play.
And scapegoating guys is something that actually happens to take blame off of yourself, right? I mean, we see PEDs in baseball. Barry Bonds and Alex Rodriguez and those guys sort of became the face of it. Obviously, Colin Kaepernick started this movement, but there are plenty of other players currently protesting right now, and it's not a weekly story. It's not a big story. They're not being blackballed or anything like that. Kaepernick was the guy who maybe was made an example of here.
Yeah, but we were just celebrating Marshawn Lynch at the beginning of the show. I mean, he's dancing on the sideline. We're talking about the joy that it's bringing to Oakland. I mean, he's on the bench. You have Michael Bennett, who I saw him at the Mayweather-McGregor fight. He even sat for the national anthem of Ireland. It's not just about the U.S. He even sat for Conor McGregor's national anthem. Something. All right, should we talk some basketball? Let's change gears a little bit.
All right, the Crossover released the bracket today for its one-on-one NBA player tournament. We've taken a look. You can catch the whole thing at the Crossover. What first-round matchup intrigues you the most?
Okay, matchup that I'm looking for. The Steph Curry versus Kristaps Porzingis, I think, is probably my favorite one. 6'3" versus 7 foot, I think would be interesting because, Steph obviously can shoot he could shoot his way through this entire tournament. But Porzingis, if he has the ball, I don't know how Curry could stop him.
It's very interesting when you look at the little guys in this, Steph and Kyrie, but especially Steph. How does anyone guard him in space, though? Because we've seen him hit like 30 consecutive threes from 30 feet away. And if you're out there with no help behind you, he can drive right by you. Now, the natural question after that is, who wins the whole thing?
Okay, in my opinion, and I'm just going to go chalk here, winning the whole thing would be #1 overall seed LeBron James. First of all, if everything stayed to the favorites, this is the games he'd have to win. Lance Stevenson, John Wall, Giannis, Harden, and then he'd face former teammate Kyrie Irving in the final. Besides Giannis, I don't actually see who gives LeBron James much of an issue there. I mean, he's got it all. He can defend on the perimeter, obviously. We know about his complement of offensive skills, even if his jump shot is ice cold, which is really the one thing where we've seen LeBron struggle sometimes when he starts settling on the jumper. All he has to do is take it to the hoop. I mean, who's stopping LeBron James when he's driving to the basket?
Probably no one, but you know who could win this tournament? Kawhi Leonard. Because Kawhi, if I was going to say he has one weakness in his game, it's court vision and awareness and passing. That's one thing he could get better at. That doesn't apply in one-on-one. And who's better in isolation than Kawhi Leonard right now? Maybe no one. I mean, he very much reminds me of Kobe Bryant, actually, on the offensive end, the way he plays. And then when you're talking about the best perimeter defender in the game, arguably ever, it's Kawhi Leonard as well. That would suit him very well going up against those other guys like Durant, like a LeBron or a Curry or a Kyrie. To me, Kawhi is a blend of Kobe Bryant and Scottie Pippen, and that's a pretty darn good one-on-one player.
Well, of course, Kevin Durant, 3 on this list, but if you ask anyone in his Twitter account, he should be number 1. Meanwhile, let's talk some college football. Another wild weekend in college football. Lots of opportunities to lose a lot of money, but for more, we welcome in our college football analyst. Pete Mundo is here. Maybe I'm just talking about myself. All right, let's talk about this USC-Texas wild double overtime when USC pulls it out. Should this be a little bit of a wake-up call for USC, considering Texas is down this year? Was this a reality check?
I'd be concerned if I was USC right now. First off, that win over Stanford in week 2 doesn't look nearly as good after Stanford loses to San Diego State the following week. Now this Texas team 2 weeks ago, Maryland puts up 51 points on them with a couple of underclassmen quarterbacks. I know defensive coordinator Todd Orlando made some tweaks for Texas, but still, Sam Darnold's the Heisman favorite, the number 1 potential pick in the NFL draft, and he's thrown now 6 interceptions over 3 games, 2 in each game. 7 touchdowns to 6 picks. He's looked far from a Heisman contender so far this season. I'd be a little concerned if I was USC so far.
Clemson probably silenced any doubters over the weekend. Kelly Bryant has stepped in nicely for Deshaun Watson. Any chance this year's club is better than last year's national championship team?
Not better, because Deshaun Watson's still Deshaun Watson. The defense is better, which is impressive and could very well carry this team to a national title. But still, Kelly Bryant looks great, and the thing for me that's impressed me so much is his downfield passing has been just so good so far. For a redshirt freshman, it's just blown me away. It's not better than last year's team, but with the landscape of college football right now, you can talk about this being the second best team in the sport behind the Alabama Crimson Tide.
The defense was so good, they made Lamar Jackson look like just another guy. And you look at the rest of the schedule for Louisville, I'm not sure if they have another game where if he wants to be a front runner for the Heisman or be in serious contention for the Heisman, Pete, I don't know where he's going to find a performance to do that.
Yeah, Maggie, I was looking at the schedule, and they really have 2 more games that you can say, all right, this is a chance for for Lamar Jackson to impress. A Thursday night game at NC State, and then Florida State later in the season. That's really it. None of the other games are going to be on primetime TV at any point this season. So you look at last year, they had played Florida State and Clemson both by October 1st of the season, which really allowed him to springboard his way to the Heisman Trophy. Even though they lost that Clemson game, he had 2 fantastic showings, and basically from that Clemson game on, he just held on, crossed the finish line, and won the Heisman Trophy. There's no more chances for Lamar Jackson outside of maybe those 2 games I just mentioned. So I have a hard time seeing how that's going to happen.
Where is he now in terms of Heisman race?
I think he's behind the Oklahoma quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph have just torn it up so far this season, and Lamar Jackson slides into that 3rd spot right now.
Meanwhile, quarterback Nick Fitzgerald and Mississippi State announced themselves to the nation by crushing LSU 37-7 to take their first conference win in the SEC. Fitzgerald accounted for 4 total touchdowns in the game, making him our adrenaline performer, presented by Toyota. Let's go places. From what you saw on Saturday from Fitzgerald and the rest of the Bulldogs, how could this team give Bama a run for their money?
I'm not going to go that far. I don't think they can give Bama a run for their money, but they certainly can be the 2nd best team in the SEC West. And maybe the SEC. They have a really interesting game against Georgia this weekend, which you wouldn't look at before the season as a must-watch. Now all of a sudden it is, based on what they did against LSU. So That's now an interesting matchup. And really, you look at the SEC, to me, the storyline is the SEC is so down and so mediocre outside of Alabama that Dan Mullen's the second best coach in this conference. And not to get too off the beaten path, but if you're Texas A&M or you're Tennessee and you're looking for a coach, I'm trying to pry away Dan Mullen from Mississippi State. I am. That guy has done a fantastic job without the 4- and 5-star guys that everybody else in the SEC is getting.
That's really interesting. Yeah, Tennessee not looking good after losing on that Hail Mary to Florida. Okay, let's go, overall, bird's eye view, 30,000-foot view. Obviously, it's early in the season, but which team in the top 10 do you think looks the weakest?
Wisconsin, and it's more just because I don't know how good they are. They haven't had that prime time, big time game yet. BYU is their big non-conference game, and BYU is just awful this season, unfortunately for them. So, but you look at the Big Ten West, it's not that strong. It just isn't. They have one ranked team on their schedule all season. It's Michigan. That's all they've got. So they have a good team. Alex Hornibrook's a good quarterback, but I just look at them and say, are they really a top 10 team, or are they a product of their schedule? And so far, I think it's the latter, but I ultimately think they end up in the Big Ten title game because of the makeup of that Big Ten West.
Obviously, one Power 5 conference is going to get left out of the playoff, considering Ohio State looks a little vulnerable, JT Barrett not looking that great. Michigan does not look like an overwhelmingly great team. Is it possible? Well, I guess Penn State is doing amazing. Is it possible that the Big Ten might be the conference that gets left out at the end of the year?
I don't think so, because I think the committee values the Big Ten really second behind the SEC. Even though I think the SEC is down, you can make the argument the Big Ten or the ACC is the best conference in the country right now in this season. So unless there's this perfect storm where somehow Wisconsin with one loss goes into a Big Ten title game against a 2-loss Penn State or Ohio State and then wins that game, and somehow something crazy has to happen, I think, for the Big Ten to get left out.
Few schools starting true freshmen at quarterback, whether by choice or in the case of Florida State, injury. Who's the best freshman QB in the nation right now?
So far, Jake Fromm. He's gone into Georgia, and he has the best win of any true freshman on the road against Notre Dame. I mean, that's as good as it gets for a true freshman in that atmosphere, that kind of environment to do it. And he's got another good one this weekend. They're playing Mississippi State, a team we just talked about that got the big win against LSU. If he gets a win this weekend, I mean, you're talking about Jacob Eason. We're going to forget his name by next week because Jake Fromm is going to be the leader on that team. And you see those intangibles in Jake Fromm. You saw it against Notre Dame, a calm, cool, collect guy for 19 years old. Pretty impressive.
Pete Mundo, equally as impressive as Jake Fromm on a Monday morning. Thank you.
It's got to be fun to write from, right?
It's got to be pretty good. 2 M's, though. 2 M's. You got to remember that.
We'll get the AP style book out for Robin. Thank you, Pete.
Anytime.
The pro wrestling world lost a legend on Sunday. Bobby the Brain Heenan passed away at the age of 73. Here's how he'll always be remembered.
Toughest man in the world. Nobody can beat this man. You think with all that blonde hair and a bunch of little Hulksters out there and behind you, you ripping that T-shirt off and shaking in your pythons, you think you can beat him, dummy? It can't be done by you, 10 guys like you, or 100 people like you. This is the next heavyweight champion of the world. Get ready to it, Hogan. It's all over.
To me, the greatest characters in pro wrestling are the lovable heels. Legends like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock both made their meteoric rises in the heel role. And perhaps no one personified lovable heel better than Bobby the Brain Heenan, who died yesterday at the age of 73. One of my favorite memories as a boy was going to my grandma's house, who was a big pro wrestling fan, and heading to the video store, yeah, those existed, with my little brother to rent VHS tapes of WWE, WWF at the time, events to watch all day. And no matter the tape or event, there was one thing I could always count on: the Weasel cracking me up. Whether it was as the manager of Andre the Giant, Mr. Perfect, King Haku, or Ravishing Rick Rude, or displaying his acerbic wit as a color commentator, I could always rely on the Brain to entertain. The word GOAT is thrown around a lot in today's lexicon, but rare is the person who is actually the best at what they do. Well, Bobby the Brain Heenan was just that, the greatest wrestling manager and announcer of all time. So Bobby, may you be reunited somewhere on a broadcast with Gorilla Monsoon. And thank you on behalf of all of us humanoids. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, on SI Now.